Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm the graphic designer here at Mingei International Museum.
And my name is Patricia Cue. I'm creative director at Mingei. Elizabeth and I work together with Ashley Christie, who's our content producer, and Ron Kerner, who's our photographer. We make the MAD team, or marketing and design team. So in this presentation, finding our way through collaboration, that is the first collaborative level that we are talking about, and you'll be seeing is the collaboration between the four of us. And really, it's really wonderful because although we have one person devoted to photography, another one for content, and Elizabeth and I are both graphic designers, really we're a department that works with blurred boundaries. We all really support each other in what we're doing. We work creatively together very often. Um, our content person has a really good eye for our design, and whenever we have an idea for content, we're always sharing that. And Ron, who's our photographer, he's also very well versed and has a great eye on design. So the work that you're going to see today was mostly executed by Elizabeth and myself, but really is credited to all of us.
Definitely a collaborative effort between our team.
So I'm going to move our little Zoom window to the left so we can start sharing our presentation. We lovingly prepared a presentation for you for today. I'm going to start sharing our screen. I hope everything goes well. Thank you, Joey, who's in the background helping us with tech support. Here we are. So San Diego Design Week 2021, our second edition a year ago. The museum was still in full construction mode, but it wasn't long after after September of last year that we actually started working with the wayfinding system for the museum. So it's been a long project. We started working in this project way before we moved into the museum. Is it
Bear with us, we're good.
There. Ooh. So this is a photo of when we started. It was, as you can see, the building was really in its bare bones stage. You can see here on the left, this is Jennifer Luce, the architect behind this wonderful project. She was wonderful to collaborate with, because who's going to know the building better than the architect, right? And she has a lot of experience in working with wayfinding and working with designers and also designing it herself. So this is Elizabeth and I. We're very busy with our clipboards, if you can see. And this is Christine Kim, another great collaborator in this project, who was part of the Luz team and was the person who really kept us in check about where signs were needed. Something that we learned very early on is that in this project, there are a lot of rules. So there weren't only the parameters that were dictated by us or the building. We had to be very aware of everything that was required by code and for ADA, American Disabilities Act. So in the beginning, remember, we used to have all these great fancy ideas. And Christine, this person here, always kept us saying, yes, but remember code. Yes, but remember ADA. And little did we know that all our design decisions were really going to be dictated and influenced by these codes. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that. So we've been working on this project for about how long, Elizabeth?
Several months. I feel like we sent out the final production files last December.
We actually sent our production files the day before Christmas, right?
Yeah.
So we've been working on this for almost a year. This is the types of signs that we're going to be talking about. Not so much naming or site specific, because that is still being in progress and interpretive. You can come and see here at the museum. Actually, you can come and see everything we're going to
Yeah.
show you. You can visit the museum. Everything is installed, and you will have kind of like the information on how this all happened. So the first signs that we worked with were the identification signs. So these were the signs that are required by law to have wherever there's a door. If you have a door, even if it's an internal door, a room within a room, it needs a sign. It needs to say what it is. We also work with directional signs, and these are the signs that tell you how to get somewhere. The ones that you see that have arrows or are in the shape of an arrow. And these, we had a lot more freedom with directional signs because, or these are also called wayfinding signs, because these ones are not regulated. So here you can really play more with the type, the size, the material, etc. Restrictive signs, they can be, they're the ones that limit access or prevent certain actions, and some of them can go together, can be sandwiched with identification, but they're usually standalones. And interpretive is what we use here at the museum to either explain a piece of art, or to tell a story, or to pay homage to a person or an event. Naming is, as you can imagine, it's when you name a space, and in museums are very much enabled by philanthropy, and we want to really acknowledge the people that are behind this effort. So we have opportunities big and small. We have made some very big names, and we have also do small things like plaques, for example. So all of that falls into naming. And site specific are anything that is, in this case, very connected to the brand, but environmental signs that we design for a specific place that need to conform to a specific location. So we're going to talk mostly today about identification, directional, restrictive, some interpretive. So what were the different aspects that we took into consideration? First, clarity and legibility. We had to have good readable typeface, which was not our brand typeface. We have a custom typeface, right?
Yes.
And Elizabeth will tell you a little bit about that in a minute. So we had to stay away from that because it just didn't have the flexibility and the legibility that we needed. It's very important to work with size, proportion, color, contrast, and support graphics. So these, I would say these three aspects are the ones that you want to really have a good grasp on, and really settle with once you have your prototypes, to really decide on before you build your whole system. You have to also think about material considerations. What are you going to make your signs of? And you can't decide that up in the air. When in that photograph that we showed you, there was no way for us to decide materials because we couldn't see where they were. Even if we saw swatches, it was very hard to imagine what a space would look like, because your material needs to respond to where the sign is going to be placed. We also had to think about material considerations, especially for contrast and for relief, for dimensional lettering, which is required by code. So thinking about how a certain sign is going to be reproduced was important. We had to, systems thinking is key when you do signage. You have to think about unity, but you don't want the system to be too rigid, boring. It needs to allow for flexibility in length of words, amount of information. Some signs have to be read at eye level. Some signs you need to read at a higher than eye level, some below. So it's the usage and the space were very, very important. And then sustainability. It's about creating a system that has the possibility to grow. Signage systems are always going to be changing. You will need more signs, you will need different signs. And this was also another aspect that why it was really important for the museum that we did that in-house. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, the different options of working, developing a wayfinding system. Branding this was the biggest and most fun challenge. How do we comply with code, with ADA, with legibility, with systems thinking, with the materials that the building has, and yet still somehow connect the system to the museum's brand? Fabrication, like everything, like a cook with a good butcher, you need a good fabricator, and you need to communicate early with this person in the process so they get to know what your ideas are and what the space is like. Specifications, your fabricator is going to be your partner in creating the final drawings and deciding where those signs are going to go. Scheduling and cost are also going to be very much tied to this fabricator. So this is a lot. And, I guess all of these things, maybe for those of you who are very experienced in wayfinding, this is not new. If you've never done wayfinding, there's a lot of common sense involved. And all of these aspects, I think, seem pretty common sense. But take a screenshot of the slide because it took us quite a bit of reading and quite a bit of discussion and going back and forth to really put down in paper what were the variables that and the aspects to take into consideration. So let's move on. And so the new Mingei, what were the aspects of the new Mingei that we really wanted to think of in designing this system? We didn't want to oversign. That was really important. We didn't want to fill the space with arrows and signs, go here, go there, this is that. It's not an airport. It's not a hospital. It's a museum. We want always the artwork and the experience of the visitor to be first. So sign just enough so that people know where the basic services are, where to go, but we wanted to strike a balance between that and the viewer finding their way on their own, creating a little bit of a discovery, an adventure. We wanted to make people feel welcome. And I have to say that now that we opened the museum, remember last week we stood there in the middle and we were very happy to see that it works.
Yeah.
And it works because of the building. You're seeing Plaza de Panama on one side, the Alcazar on the other. You stand in the middle of the commons, which is a very open space. And it's very easy to orient yourself because there are no walls. Mm-hmm. So that was a great factor in terms of orientation. Difficult because we didn't have a lot of places to place signs on. So you'll see that the columns became our friends. We also had to think that this was a place where we wanted people to socialize, to take photographs, to feel relaxed. And I feel that sometimes over-signing kills that joy a little bit.
Disrupts the environment.
Mm-hmm. So we didn't want that to happen. Do you want to tell them, Elizabeth, maybe about the 4 levels of the museum and what happens on each one?
Yeah. So our first level, the level that you usually will come in through, is our commons level. It's always free to the public. We have glass cases of art from our permanent collection. Our reception is there, along with our education center and courtyard. A lot of people haven't been going outside our courtyard, but it's public and free, and you can admire our Zaner fence around it. But basically, it's somewhere where you can just kind of socialize, dine, and shop all together in one floor. You head upstairs. It's our gallery level. You do need to have an admission ticket, but we have two exhibitions upstairs right now, Global Spirit and Humble Spirit. Our library is also upstairs. We have an art reference library where you can just go in and read some books. Our Founders Gallery is also there along with our terraces. Our terraces are now also open for the public, so it's really nice to kind of get
very cool.
an overhead view of the park. It's my favorite people watching place. We also have our collaborative level, which is downstairs from the commons level. So basically, gallery is 3, commons level is 2, collaborative level is 1. That's where all of us work, every single department, from marketing and design to development to collections. We're all there. Our theater is also there, and we have this beautiful curtain, and it's just the best. Like, what I really like about our new building is just the fact that all of us as staff are in one space, so it's kind of nice to like pop into one office and say hi, whereas before we were kind of divided into a couple different levels. Like, you would have to go downstairs to see education or go upstairs to see development, and now we're all together. It's great.
And they're all very different spaces, which makes it wonderful for the experience, but was challenging for wayfinding, because we wanted the space to tell you a little bit of what to do. But for example, in the gallery level, we have no wayfinding because it's all gallery, it's all art. In the commons level, we have tons of wayfinding. In the collaborative level, again, we have very little because it's only open for when there's an event in the theater, and the basement is just like the bare bones. So we really had to learn what was going to be done, how each floor was going to be used to set our priorities. We worked with many different materials, and this was, I don't know about you, but it was new for me. I'm a paper kind of person or a screen kind of person. And we had to learn how to work with glass, with wood, cement board, drywall, stainless steel, even fabric. So it's
big learning curve.
Yes, it wasn't boring. Let's put it like that. We have spaces that have multiple uses, like the theater, the courtyard, the terraces, the library, and the boardroom. And we also have craft or art commissions installed throughout the museum, for which we are right now in the process of creating interpretive materials for. So I hope that by now you're like dying to come and see the museum. So these were the main challenges, and I already mentioned some of them. I don't want to spend too much time on this slide. I talked about balancing wayfinding and indicating. Make sure that there's some signage that reminds viewers that to go to the second level, they need to pay, and really support the Mingei experience rather than get on the way. We also wanted to enhance or make the viewer know that once you're in the building, you can still have this indoor-outdoor experience, that you're in the museum, but you can go out to the courtyard. You're in the gallery, but you can go out into the terraces. You're in the Alcazar side, and you can end up in the Panama side. So that kind of in and out open movement was really important for us to keep in mind. So this is not to scare you, but this is what our sign program looked like. So before we started really creating the designs, we needed a very, very detailed inventory of what were the locations that needed signs. And you have here location, the regulatory code. So this is just for us to know what kind of sign was that, stair ID, level ID, stairwell, etc. How many, if it required braille or not, if it required tactile lettering, pictograms. ID name is the copy, the actual wording that would go on the sign. And then size, the material behind it and around it, the material for the sign, the color, the type color, and then how it would be mounted on the wall. Now, I don't take credit for this table. It's a collaboration. This we did in a Google Doc, and it was shared between us, between Christine from the loose team and from our sign fabricator. And every time we made a design decision, it was reflected on this table. This table changed for a very long time. But when we created our drawings, this is the matrix against which we make sure that we were designing or inspecting our work correctly. So it's not very sexy yet. It gets better. This is 2 pages from the most important pages from what is required from ADA and code for the identification signs. So there's very clear guidelines about minimum sizes. I would say on average, you cannot go smaller than 6 by 6. Most of the signs are 8 by 8. You have minimum sizes for type spacing between letters. You can only use uppercase and you can only use sans serif type. So that already took out, eliminated a lot of different possibilities, which at first they were a little disappointing and sad, right? Remember, but I think that as designers, we also thrive with parameters and limitations and really making the most out of this. So it was also a motivation to know that we could create signs that were beautiful, that were on brand, and that allowed access to people who really, for example, had visual impairments or any kind of other accessibility issue. They could touch the letters, they could touch the icons, they could touch the braille, that they were legible from a distance, that there was clarity to them. So we really embraced that, and that was our motivation to implement these rules. And we were really good
I think we were good
at doing this. Working with a grid was very helpful.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth is very good at doing that. She's very, very detailed oriented, and that's what we needed at this point. So once we decided what were our design parameters, we moved on to creating the designs. You want to talk a little bit about the brand and how we brought that into the signage?
Yes. So this is our logo. This is our main logo shape. And it was designed by Yomar Augusto. The typeface inside is Mingei Mono, which is again a typeface designed by Yomar Augusto. And it was actually kind of derived from this silk cigar dress that you see on the right.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. And the idea is that the shape is actually a responsive shape to the text. So going back to what I said about this being the main shape, behind the scenes, we've actually been experimenting with other shapes, and you'll see them a little later in the presentation. But the idea is that it's just kind of derived from these like little squares. So Yomar just made a couple of different shapes, and yeah, that's just how it went.
So what I think that what is really important is that the part that you said, responsive box, right?
Yeah.
So it's a box that becomes changes shape depending on the type that's inside it. And it connects to our collection in the sense that we are a craft, folk art, and design museum where irregularity, we celebrate the handmade, we celebrate the non-industrial, we celebrate the irregularity and the beauty of use. So that's what the box stands for.
And these are different identification signs. So we have four different sizes, 6x6 being the smallest, 8x4.5, 12x12, 8x8. We still wanted to have some flexibility, so it's essentially a square with a notch cut out. We have some where the right notch is cut out, the left where we rotated the square, and going back to our shape, just like how a notch triangle is cut in, we thought kind of a way, well, the most creative way that we could still kind of remain compliant with code, but still brand it, was to incorporate this kind of little slash within this rectangle square shape.
And this really was our creative sandbox. You're looking at it.
Yeah.
This is, that notch is what allowed us to bring the spirit of the brand into the signage to make them look like they were designed for the museum, that we didn't just resort to, you know, the standards that you can just order and buy. We were going a more difficult route, but one that was very well worth it. Also, do you remember when we were actually working with the type for all of the signs, the notch became a great tool for flexibility, because we could move it around depending on how long the words were, if we had one line signs or two lines. So it worked out very well.
And this is our grid. So our grid, each square is 3/8 of an inch, because going back to that ADA image that we saw earlier, ADA requirements called for 3/8 of an inch of space around raised elements like letters and braille. So by making this grid, the idea was that we would always have at least one square, 3/8 of an inch, between lines. So basically just having 3/8 of an inch of leading. And you can kind of see how it works with the 12x12 sign, the 8x8, the 6x6, 8 and 4.5. Our basic rule was it would be 2 squares to the left and then 3 from up top. Or if it was kind of a sign where we rotated the notch up above, I think it was about 3 to 4 squares up, 2 to the left.
Also, this might sound obvious, but always start designing with your longest words and your most complex signs. Chief Advancement Officer is a mouthful. So if that worked within the 12x12, that was a good idea. So
this was the longest title we had, and it worked, and that was the great part.
And we always had to allow for space for braille. So
our icon development. So our icons were created using characteristics from our typeface Mingei Mono. I wanted it to be kind of a quiet, subtle way to reference our branding. So these are kind of the main players I used, IOVLEU, and you can kind of see how our courtyard icon was essentially 2 O's combined together to make a tree. This little bracket from the L and the E was used for our elevator icon. I literally copy pasted the V, put it upside down, right side up. And I found it just to be, again, like something really quiet that we could still reference our brand.
I love that the O is not totally a circle.
Yeah, our O is not a perfect circle. It's actually a little more pill-shaped. And I just, going back to Mingei and how we have, like, you know, we celebrate irregularities. It's not perfect. So I just really liked it being kind of the star of the show.
I'll add that because in the collaboration, we were passing files back and forth between Elizabeth and Christine and I. And when you're collaborating, when you're working with other people, it's very important that your system is very clear. And in this case, all of the icons fitted within a module that could be separated by another module that is of equal width, just like you do with the monospace type. So we had to set it up in a way that it was successful, even if somebody who wasn't very familiar with it worked with it. So I think it worked. We've had several people help us and work with us in making signs, and it has been very successful. The stroke also is very important. It's a great way of connecting the icons with the type is by maintaining the same stroke width and scaling them uniformly.
Going back to the icons, all icons are created using the circle grid. It's not the traditional perfect circle grid. Again, this is a grid that we used using our irregular pill-shaped O. And the idea was, again, like sometimes I balance the grid and I kind of have it line up like here on fire hydrant, but there were other times where it was just necessary to break the grid, sometimes around the spacing, sometimes just around just areas like this. I think it's really important to kind of have the flexibility and just feel okay breaking the grid, but just having some flexibility with it.
I think that with icons, if you treat them as characters in a typeface, like letters, where the space around them is not mathematically designed, but optically, it's a little harder, but it pays off because it's going to be a lot more balanced. It's about thinking of the space around an icon, not so much as inches or centimeters, but more like if I poured water around this icon, is this equivalent to the water that I would pour around this one?
Yeah, like
so
a
that
visually
weight. That once I had a professor tell me that, think if you pour the water, would it be the same amount of water? And it was for me a eureka moment because it made me understand visual spacing. We have favorites.
Yeah, I have a favorite.
What's your favorite?
My favorite's the elevator.
Oh, it's not here yet.
Which one's
Jessica Yorks, our Chief Advancement Officer, she loves the fire extinguisher. A lot of people really like the defibrillator one because it's a heart. My favorite is the water fountain. It's just, it's very
funny.
cute. There's motion there. There's a story. Water's flowing.
Water is flowing. No, you've seen a lot of grids, but this is another grid yet again. And basically, right after we made the icons, we placed them back on this 3/8 grid, and we just kind of aligned accordingly. So we used the same rule: 2 from the left, 3 up above. Again, unless the notch was up top, then we just use the parameters from the bottom up. Ooh. Perfect.
So this is another little sandbox that we discovered. Where can we make it a little bit more tied to Mingei, to our exhibitions, to our collection? And we were very happy when we learned that in this the sign that you put inside the restaurant on the restroom doors, the ones that are for gender neutral, I think that we'll show afterwards. The triangle doesn't need to have the icon of a man and a woman like it usually does. You can have it empty or you can have anything you want. So Elizabeth is going to tell you what we opted for.
So we're calling this, I call it internally Bathroom Bazaar. I think it's really Mingei that we kind of found some beauty in like a functional room, even if it is a restroom. But the idea was to extend our gallery experience to our restrooms. So on our triangles, we actually decided to use patterns to create vector patterns based off textiles from our permanent collection. And there's about, I think, 11 or 12 triangles, and they have different patterns. So here you can kind of see this cool rooster from Poland, and the little flower it has right here. You can also see these tunic fragments from Peru, and they have this cool person holding some kind of wand. It's fun.
So they're vectors that were printed on metal. We'll show you in a minute. Here is more of them. And this, the footnote on or the caption on where they're coming from, this is we're going to place that on the back of the door so that people know where they're coming from. We're going to skip this for a minute because I'm mindful of the time. If this requires that we switch PDFs, let's just keep going. What do you think? And then at the end, if we have time, we show them the sign program, the actual final drawings. So the second phase was, the third phase actually was prototypes. And we had them made in many different sizes, different materials, different colors. And by that time, we were able to come to the museum and to actually hold them up and see how they looked against wood or against a cement board. Are they too big? Most of them were too big. And go from there. Dimension in wayfinding is so important. And if you're a print designer like we are, or a screen designer, it's a different world. Yeah. It's really developing, internalizing the sense of scale for wayfinding in a building takes a learning curve. So if you're doing something like this, I would say prototype, prototype, prototype. Even if it's not in the actual material, make cut printouts at the real size and put them up. See, move back and forth, ask questions, leave them up and come and see them the next day. Scale is very important. So here are some photographs of the signs that are already installed. And if you come to the museum, you'll see them. These are the signs on can metal. And I will show you in a minute actual signs so you can see how they are in the back. They have a beveled edge. In the back, they have an acrylic backing. And whenever it was a light background or drywall, we had this bluish color that also ties to our brand, which main color is indigo. Rollmark letters. Rollmark is this dimensional lettering, the same as the icons, Braille, and you have here the bathroom Bazaar triangles printed on metal too. This is another sign. This, in this case, is the light metal on a dark background. And this is, again, the blue metal on drywall. And you see here a sampling of the different tones and materials that we have in the museum that work very well with the sign system. Thank you, Ron, for the great photographs. More of them on wood. This is the entrance to our office. We're in there. Hello.
That's where we are.
So it's the fact that they're not placed right against the wall that creates really nice shadows and a sort of dimensional effect. Oh, we haven't said the typeface is Ringside.
Yeah.
By Hoffler. And it's one of our secondary brand typefaces, and it's the book version. Right?
Yes,
book. We use semi-bold in exit and some instances, but it's mostly, and it's very legible, has great spacing, just very well defined. Yes, we didn't use, usually when you have long ascenders and descenders is good for signage, but in this case, we didn't use text case, so it's all uppercase.
Yep.
For the basement and the stairwells, we used a more affordable option for the signs, and this is acrylic that has been back painted. We'll show you also in a second the prototypes. And here's the metal working also with the stone. You want to tell them about this other part? This is about wayfinding.
Yeah, these are early explorations of our wayfinding signage. So going back to our brand shape, these are some small other explorations we've done with the shapes. So this is like backwards, reverse version of our logo. I call this the ship because I still think it looks like a battleship. And this one was an arrow. So the idea was that the shape had three different modules, two for text, one for braille. So the basic idea was just two of this would be reserved for text, the bottom part would be for braille, and the shapes would just be responsive to the type alignment. And we actually settled on this version. I know it doesn't look like an arrow that much on screen, but we found that in person when we started using the prototypes, it really lended itself for like directional signage.
Yeah, so this is not for identification, it's not to put outside a room, but it's to point you bathroom to the right, gallery to the left. So these ones, we had a little bit more freedom because as I said in the beginning, these ones are not subject to code requirements. You can use uppercase, lowercase, you don't need to use Braille. You can really, the relationship to the margins is free. So this is really free reign, but they need to somehow connect to your identification signs. And remember, I told you that we have a lot of open spaces at the museum. So they're great, but there's no place to have signs. So we work with the columns, which you can see here. We have them in strategic points in the plaza level, and they run through the building up and down. And we went for a system which I called is like the enchanted forest, right? Is when you go in a magical forest and you have these arrows telling you how to go to um, the different interesting points in the story, right? So they stick out. We're able to place up to 3 destinations per arrow, and we designed them in a way that they can go parallel to the column, 90 degrees or 45 degrees. You will see it in a minute. And we went, rather than translating each destination into Spanish, at least, we thought that it was more universal and more inclusive to have icons. So Elizabeth designed beautiful icons for each one of the different places in the museum. And we, in this case, we work with uppercase and lowercase, still ringside. And they were placed also with dimensional lettering with row mark, even though they're so high that they're not to be touched, but we wanted to have the connection with the rest of the signage. So you can see here some photographs of what they look like. And this is another collaborator came in this part of the project, which was Brian, our metal worker, in designing these clamps for the signs. And some, as I mentioned, parallel 90 degrees and 45 degrees. And the interesting thing about these clamps is that you can see they are not attached to the column. There's magnets attaching them to the column, not screws, because by fire code, we're not allowed to perforate those columns, and we're not allowed to glue anything on them. So anything we put there needs to be removable easily. So the nice thing is that we can exchange them. We can add more if we need to, or we can take them down and change what's on them. So it took a little bit of planning and thinking, and thank you, Brian, for the great design. Here you can see them up close. So the letters are dimensional, but the icons aren't. We felt that they didn't have the resolution and the cleanliness that we needed when they were dimensional. You'll see the prototype they're made. They have an acrylic center, and it's 2 sheets of can metal on each side. So they're pretty light. We wanted them to be light. And here you can see them at work at the museum. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and we have a lot of questions. This is great. Um, we want to spend the last 10 minutes answering some of your questions. You want to show them the bathroom bazaar. So we have some prototypes here to show you. So that's
This is one.
Elizabeth showing you. So that's one of the triangles, and you see
the dimension. So do you see this like little bevel right here? Detail it.
the most important thing is that you can, for the visually impaired, is that they can, through touch, distinguish the triangle, which is for man, and the circle, which is for woman. So that means a bathroom for either women or men. So that's for those doors. This is the ones that we did in acrylic, and you can see how the edge is beveled. And when you do acrylic, you need to back paint the acrylic so that it doesn't, you don't see the wall behind it. So these turned out pretty clean, and they were a lot more cost efficient than these ones, these pretty ones. You could almost make a necklace out of this one, right? Very shiny. So this is all dimensional by code, needs to be dimensional. And here is the braille, and also has this the acrylic backing that separates it from the wall. Yeah, you go, you careful, because they're a little sharp on the edges.
Our big arrow.
So those were for wayfinding.
You can see the holes here, which is already put in.
The clamps. So it's a, it's a different world than print, but it's a wonderful one. I highly recommend it. And if you have a question, if you're ever doing this and you have a question, just send us an email. We'll help you with whatever we can. I want to also thank Repro House, Ben from Repro House, in working with us in this project. Let's see, questions. Chris McCampbell, hi Chris. When was the fabricator brought on board? Was it early in the design process or only after you made it into construction documents? Early, very early, because they really were very helpful in reviewing plans of the museum and determining together with us where the signs had to be. So location of the signs was the first thing. Then we kind of went our separate ways, we designed, and once we had design ideas, we brought them back into prototype. And once we decided exactly what were the specs, we made files in Illustrator, which we then sent to them, and then they recreate those files for production for them. So it's a lot of back and forth, but they came in very early. Juga, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly.
If we aren't, we're really
Juga, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Crystal, with the remodeling of the museum space, did the team also consider a full rebranding of Mingei as well, or the idea was always maintaining the original logo and branding? You want to take this one?
Yeah. So we've actually been trying to rebrand at the same time as we were producing these. So we had our logo to start with, and that's kind of been, I don't want to say guideline, but kind of main inspiration. And it's kind of what we just use as like a basic guideline on how to just design moving forward. So I mean, there's a lot to take in with like that cigar silk dress, the way like the patterns can just weave in, the way we can kind of create different shapes through there. Even that basic notch, just that small design element is something we've been able to just kind of incorporate throughout our branding. So I would say our original logo looks a lot different from our new logo. So I wouldn't say the idea was always maintaining the original logo, but our new logo, yes, the idea has been to always kind of, I guess, how do you say, like unify,
Mhm.
unify it together.
Inform one with the other.
Yeah.
From Sean Bacon, how do you prove or check the Braille translations? So that's when you need a very good ally in your sign maker. And in this case, they have a person that did that for us, somebody that we hired externally as a consultant. Also, Sean Bacon. Hi, Sean Bacon. Did you start with a budget to work within, or was there flexibility with costs? Was that potentially part of why you had some common shapes that were used, or was that solely to create unity among the signs? We did have a budget, and we were constantly having it be revised, our estimates be revised by the sign maker. Um, the decisions of the signs that are repeated really is for cohesion, because we didn't feel that we needed a very flashy system that had lots of variations. It really wasn't because of cost. I can tell you proudly that we're about to be done with naming and everything, and we're still under budget. So again, if you're working with a good sign maker who's your ally, they're going to be pointing out, if you make that decision, that's really going to bring your budget high up. If you're, for example, we at some point we considered stainless steel signs, and that was going to be very, very expensive. That's when we did this option of having the acrylic backing with the can metal top, right? Because making everything in solid stainless would have been very, very pricey. So it's a it's a back and forth. Um, Now, if you did, this is a small project, and if you did something as for a public space, such a hospital or an airport or where there's a lot of traffic, that's a different story. I think that budgeting there would have to be scrutinized very early in the process. Chris McCampbell, how many rounds of design exploration did you go through to arrive at the final design? Were there other design options that were thrown out early? Yes, yes, very much so. We had some signs that had teapots on them.
Yeah.
So, oh yeah, no. There were some crazy things. Me and my Mexican soul, I wanted wrought iron letters. And, oh,
It was fun.
we started by really doing a big survey of what was out there. We had some crazy ideas, but code and ADA really put our design yayas down.
Yeah.
And we had to really focus on what was important. Um, so 5 minutes head up. I like the variation of the acrylic. Thank you, Kathy Jones. Thank you, Sean Bacon, for the kudos. Bathroom Bazaar is a favorite. Thank you for the magnetic solution. Kudos to. Does the Braille say gender neutral on the restroom signs? Yes. Good question. Arsu, thank you for the good wishes. Love the innovation. You use the same font, but in upper and lowercase. Yes, yes, it's all Sentinel. Ringside, sorry. Very neat, love it. Nice. Are there any other questions? Thank you for your support, everybody. Yeah, Repro House. So yes, I think that we can start wrapping it up a little bit before 2.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for staying on with us. And please do come to the museum, look at the signs. There's more to see that is not here and that we're still working on, mostly on naming.
Yeah.
And yes, you have our contact. You are now our partners in crime with this. If you ever have a question that we can help you with, come see us at the museum. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you, Stacy, San Diego Design Week, and Joey for your support. I hope to see you all soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.